There's only one disadvantage that a Cradle Catholic can conceivably have over a non-Catholic, which is the danger of being a Cradle Catholic is not being aware of what you have that no one else has. And the advantage occasionally of being a convert is we as converts who come into the church from outside, it can be easier to see the infinite gift. Well, it's easy even for a Catholic to see the infinite gift of the church, but what's harder to see is how everybody else is dying of thirst in the desert, essentially, except a Catholic who understands the truths of the faith and who, let's hope, is at least occasionally in a state of grace. I was walking in nature early one morning, just lost in my thoughts, and I had long since, I was essentially an atheist at that point. I had long since given up on any idea of God or religion. And I received the most spectacular grace in my life. As I was walking along from one moment to the next, the curtain between earth and heaven disappeared, and I found myself in the presence of God, very knowingly in the presence of God, seeing my life and experiencing my life as I would see it after I died and looked back over it in the presence of God. And I saw instantaneously, I saw how I would feel about everything after I died. I saw that my two greatest regrets when I died would be, number one, all of the time and energy I had wasted worrying about not being loved, when every moment of my existence I was held in an ocean of love, greater than I ever imagined could exist, coming from this all-knowing, all-loving God. And the other regret would be every hour I had wasted doing nothing of value in the eyes of heaven. I saw my life as though, all my life I had been greedily accumulating piles of Monopoly money, that brightly colored paper money from the game of Monopoly, when right next to it there was a stack of gold coins that I had been ignoring, which would be, of course, merit in heaven. I saw how foolish it was to be greedy for things that wouldn't be doing me any good at all, even 100 years hence, when I'm dead, whereas I could have been greedy, so to speak, to accumulate treasure in heaven, from which I would very literally be benefiting 100 million years from now. Now, I know this isn't the healthiest attitude in the world, but I was a Harvard Business School marketing professor, so I have an excuse. Everything was net present value, everything was maximizing returns, and I was still seeing this a little bit in that way. So I didn't see the error in being greedy, I just saw how stupidly greedy I had been. And if I want to be smart and greedy, the only thing that made sense would be to try to be as great a saint as possible, essentially. Another thing that I saw in this experience, everything that had ever happened to me had been the most perfectly designed thing that could come to meet me, coming from the hands of this all-knowing, all-loving God, not only including those things that had caused the most suffering at the time, but especially those things that had caused the most suffering at the time. And of course, I saw that the meaning and purpose of my life was to worship and serve my Lord and God and Master who was revealing himself to me. Now, I will say one other thing. Probably the biggest single transformative aspect of this experience was just coming into the incredibly intimate knowledge that God not only knew me personally, not only knew my name, but had been watching over me and caring about me every moment of my existence from my conception, as though I were the only person he had ever created or ever would create. He not only knew and controlled everything that ever happened to me, but he knew how I felt at every moment of my life and cared about how I felt at every moment of my life, and was made happy by everything that made me happy, and was saddened with me by everything that made me sad. Every night before going to sleep, I would say a short prayer that I had made up to learn the name of my Lord and Master and God who had revealed himself to me. A year to the day after that first experience, I went to sleep, and I thought I was awoken by a hand gently on my shoulder and led to a room and left alone with the most beautiful young woman I could ever imagine. And I knew without being told that it was the Blessed Virgin Mary. When I found myself in her presence, all I wanted to do was throw myself on my knees and somehow honor her appropriately. In fact, the first thought that crossed my mind was, oh my gosh, I wish I at least knew the Hail Mary, but I didn't. I was just overwhelmed, and actually lifted into a state of ecstasy simply by the love that flowed from her. And as beautiful as she was to look at, even more powerfully affecting was the sound of her voice. When she spoke, her voice was like what makes music music. It was like the essence of music. And it carried with it a love that just flowed through all of my fibers and lifted me up into a state of ecstasy. And the first thing she said to me was she offered to answer any questions I might have for her. The only reason is because I'm still, again, excuse me for saying this, I'm still that Harvard Business School marketing professor. I'm still greedy, and given what communion is, and given the fact that we live for all eternity, and our eternity is entirely dependent on this little period of 60 or 70 or 80 years of life on earth, and I'm not sure what we receive when we receive Holy Communion, but it's probably going to matter for all eternity. And it's probably going to be a plus for all eternity. And that's not a good reason, it's a greedy reason, but it's still a reason to want to receive communion every day. Thank you.